Most people in medieval Europe were not lords, ladies, or knights. They were peasants or common people. Most peasants were serfs who lived on the manor estates and worked for a lord. Some peasants, though, chose to work freely and not serve a lord. Serfs were very much a part of a manor estate. In fact, if a manor estate was taken over by a new lord, the serfs had to remain there to serve the new lord. If you're thinking that being a serf sounds something like being an enslaved person, you're right. Sadly, the practice of slavery had existed for thousands of years in different parts of the world. However, the idea of serfdom happened slowly, over time, as the culture and development of medieval Europe took shape. There was, as always, a need for large numbers of workers. However, as more and more people became Christian, the church became opposed to enslaving Christians. As a result, many people who had been enslaved were freed. These men were known as freedmen. Unfortunately, freedmen were not always able to make much use of their freedom. Since they had been enslaved all their lives, they were generally poor. Even if they could buy land, they probably would not have been able to protect themselves against warring tribes and powerful lords. Therefore, around the 900s, many freedmen began to trade freedom for security by placing themselves under the protection of a feudal lord. This is how many freedmen became serfs. It's important to note that medieval serfs had some rights that many enslaved people did not. They could not be sold apart from the land, and they had the right to keep what was left over after paying whatever they owed to their lord. In addition, serfs could pass property on to their children. There weren't many luxuries for serfs in the Middle Ages. Generally, they led a hard life. Lords were supposed to protect their serfs, but if a lord treated a serf unfairly, there was little a serf could do about it. Serfs had to work extremely hard, and they kept only a small amount of what they grew or made. By around the year 1000, wood was hard to come by in parts of Europe. The house of a serf typically had a simple wood frame, with a mixture of mud and straw spread in between the wooden beams as walls. The roof of the house was made of straw, and the floor was dirt. In wet weather, the floor turned to mud. Serfs slept on the floor, perhaps with a layer of straw to provide a little bit of cushioning and warmth. They lived with their animals, chickens, sheep, and pigs. There was no fireplace, just a hearth in the middle of the floor, with smoke drifting up through a hole in the roof. Serfs built the few pieces of furniture they possessed, sewed their own clothes, and grew or raised their own food. In fact, serfs made most everything they needed. Serfs lived close to the land. They spent most of their days working for the lord of the manor, plowing his fields, planting his seeds, harvesting his crops, and stomping grapes to make his wine. Women were often in charge of small livestock. They would shear the master's sheep, spin the wool into yarn, and weave it into cloth. Women also had the job of tending the family vegetable garden and caring for the children. While the serfs prepared food and goods for the master, they had very little themselves. They lived mostly on bread, vegetables, and ale or beer. Interestingly, historians have noted that women's diets seemed to improve after about the year 1000. This helped them live longer and have more children, contributing to the population boom of the High Middle Ages. If serfs got sick, they depended on village healers who used local herbs to treat illnesses. Lords might have been a professional physician, though his cures were probably not any more advanced. Of course, not all lords were cruel and heartless. Many realized that if their serfs were going to work hard, they had to be reasonably healthy. While all peasants, serfs, or freedmen faced many difficulties, there were still some good times in their hard lives. Just as we enjoy holidays today, people also enjoyed them in the Middle Ages. In fact, the word holiday comes from the holy days that were part of the calendar in the Middle Ages. Remember, the church was a part of everyday life on the manor estate. People celebrated many more holy days than we do today. With Sundays, saints' days, and other holidays, there were about 100 days each year when people did little work. On the holy days, the whole manor attended church, but there was usually more to these holy days than worship. The nightly tournaments you read about earlier often took place on holidays. People held parties with music and dancing. They took part in sports such as bowling and wrestling. They watched jugglers and magicians and listened to traveling troubadours and minstrels. These holidays gave people something to look forward to and lightened the load of serfdom.